Das Reich was assembled west of the Rhine River in the Ardennes, and together with the Hohenstaufen Division, comprised the offensive bulk of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps, which was to be the thrusting arm of 6th Panzer Army. Several units were detached from Das Reich to secure the Corps' right flank, further decreasing our assault capability. Though reformed, the division was logistically ill-prepared for the objectives set before them. It was calculated a minimum of roughly 12 fillings of gasoline would be needed to reach Antwerp. A mere three fillings were all that had been issued. What fuel the division had was ordered and handed over to 1st SS Panzer Corps. The situation is so critical I assigned the regimental adjutant the job of finding fuel. Even according to the optimistic timetable for the operation, Antwerp was supposed to be taken in 7 days of fighting, and only 5 days of ammunition were issued. Herbstnabel was depending on weather to render the aerial supremacy of the Allies moot, while at the same time counting on the advancing armor divisions to capture Allied fuel depots to sustain their own advance. 2nd SS Panzer Corps with 9th SS Panzer Division was assigned to the Bulge area. 2nd SS was assigned to the 6th Panzer Army Reserve. 2nd SS is reassigned to 58th Panzer Corps to relieve the 560th Volksgrenadier Division and seize the Champs-Chateau-Manhay line, turn west through Grandmenil, Erzay, Derby, cross the Earthy River, and reach the Mears River. The division was taken by train to near Prüm. All day the division's vehicles were immobile for lack of fuel. The enemy will use this time to regroup in the area of the penetration and bring more units forward to halt our advance. Fuel trucks from the dumps in Cologne finally arrive. There is only enough fuel for 1 Panzer Grenadier regiment, 3 panzer companies, and 1 artillery battalion, with each vehicle towing another vehicle, and in some cases 2. Kampfgruppe Krag, the Panzeraufklärungsabteilung, was the first fueled and headed for the main road west of Champs-Chateau. Back roads had to be used to reach the N15 at Hopefullies, with the lead element arriving at nightfall. 2nd Panzer Company moved off for Heinerscheid after dark because of Allied planes. 1 tank ran over a maintenance vehicle, killing 2. Seems like a Russian winter. During the night, the 2nd Battalion of the Der Fuhrer Regiment relieved the 560th Volksgrenadier at the Barakti Frontier area, where the 560th had been trying to break through since 19 December. Kampfgruppe Krag took over the area to the east. 75th Infantry Division Command Post opened at Acquir, Belgium, with the division assembling in the surrounding area. The German counteroffensive was advancing rapidly. The German threat demanded immediate action. There was insufficient time for the division to execute essential reconnaissance and move forward as a unit. The morning hasty assault failed to take Barakti Frontier and Frontier, but did succeed in enveloping the area and cutting the road behind the Americans. When the sky cleared about noon, Yabos appeared, so a deliberate attack is organized for dusk. 1st Panzerabteilung arrived in Verbin. 1st Panzer Company, attached to the 130th Volksgrenadier Regiment of the 560th Volksgrenadier Division near Goshan, fired on U.S. troops in Luxembourg. The Deutschland Regiment took the village of Odain on the 2nd attempt. Kampfgruppe Krag failed to take Jubival, so shifted east and occupied Champs-Chateau. Enemy forces coming from the St. Vith area were trapped by the Fuhrer Brigade coming up from behind. The artillery battalion fired on Barakti Frontier for 30 minutes with the available ammunition. Elements of the 2nd Battalion Der Fuhrer Regiment and 7th Panzer Company, supported by the regiment's heavy infantry guns and flak, attacked from the south. With the enemy distracted, 3rd Battalion and a Sturmgeschütz Company attacked from the west. The 2nd Battalion of 2 Panther tanks attacked from the north and east. The crossroads of Barakti Frontier is firmly in our hands. Radio message was received. Der Fuhrer Regiment elements advanced north through the woods for Malmtrey, encountered heavy fighting nearly as fierce as the opposition of Barakti Frontier. 7th Panzer Company's 4 remaining panzers drove north and ran into an enemy tank column at Bell High Crossroads. With the road blocked, both sides found it impossible to maneuver in the dark through the dense woods. I issued orders to 1st Panzerabteilung to make a night attack on Freenevel. 7th Corps Commander attached the 290th and 289th Infantry Regiments to the 3rd Armored Division. The 289th Regimental Combat Team was to occupy a defensive line between Grandmenil and Blair E. Best enemy information available indicate the Germans are massing to break through at the Grandmenil Manhay area, which, if accomplished, would allow the 2nd SS Panzer Corps to push through to Liège. 7th Corps ordered 3rd Armored Division to establish a strong defensive position. In the morning darkness, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Panzer Company made good time on the march until reaching the forest lane, which turned out to be a frozen-over swamp unable to support the Panzers. The Pioneer found an alternate route, but it was dawn when the column reached the forest near Odain. In the morning, I briefed the officers on the new attack plan. There had been no time for reconnaissance, so we had to study maps to understand the terrain. The information on the enemy was Freneau was lightly occupied and La Fosse would be the first real resistance. This lack of information caused reservation among the officers. 2nd and 3rd Panzer Company were attached to the 3rd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment Deutschland. 4th Panzer Company will be held in reserve. The attack stepped off in damp fog. Suspected mines on the bridge across the Asny called 2nd Panzer Company to ford the river. 4th Panzers moved on while the remaining 7 formed up. When the Army fired, the Grenadiers jumped off the Panzers. 2 Panzers were knocked out and another was hit backing up firing at the town, knocking out 2 of the enemy tanks. The last Panzer advanced firing until reaching a depression to hide in. After taking several hits to the front hull, the Panzer backed up, keeping the front towards the fire, through the woods where the 7 Panzers were parked. 2nd Panzer Company then withdrew. Army fire now shifted to 3rd Panzer Company, heading for Oyster, knocking out 2 Panzers. Group Hoppeck attacked Luxembourg from the west at the same time. 2 Panzers were knocked out by tank fire, and the Grenadiers beaten back by machine gun fire. Yabos now appeared, so all Panzers pulled into the trees. 3rd Panzer Company spotted and fired on the Army roadblock at Grandménil, knocking out an armored car, 4 tanks, 3 half-tracks, and 2 anti-tank guns, while the US 75mm fire bounced off our armor. 1st Company of 3rd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment got into the east edge of Grandménil, but after several hours of combat had to withdraw. Unknown to me, General Kruger, 58th Panzer Corps Commander, arrived at 4th Panzer Company position in the morning and ordered them to attack north immediately. The 4th Company Commander suggested the General confer with me and the Odain Church Command Post. General Kruger ordered a daylight attack up the road to Manhay, then turn west for Grandmenil and Erzay. But I convinced him to delay the attack until evening. The Panzer Regiment is to take the division objective instead of supporting the Panzer Grenadier Regiment's attack. I made a foot reconnaissance with the 4th Company Commander and his aide. We decided to attack at 2200 hours. The 289th Infantry Regiment initiated a move by foot and truck from Pauling, Belgium, to a forward assembly area in the vicinity of Briscoe, Belgium. Midway between Pital and Provo, the conglomeration of vehicles from the 3rd Armored Division began a shuttle movement of the marching troops. In darkness, the last elements of the 289th Infantry Regiment arrived at Franzel. 3rd Battalion occupied an orchard on the edge of town. Christmas Eve supper of sea rations, made beds of hay, and prepared to spend the night. It was a clear, cold moonlight night, and it was not long until a heavy frost covered the ground. Douglas B. Smith, commander of the 289th Infantry Regiment, received the mission from CCA 3rd Army. 289th Infantry Regiment's mission was to seize, organize, and defend a 10,000-yard front running south and west from Grandmenil to Erzay. Combat Command A had elements holding Grandmenil and a number of roadblocks several thousand yards south of the Grandmenil-Erzay highway. The regiment plan was for the 3 battalions to shuttle by truck in order, 3rd Battalion, 2nd Battalion, 1st Battalion, to assembly areas immediately south of the Grandmenil-Erzay highway. 3rd Battalion on the east of the woods, immediately west of Grandmenil, 2nd Battalion in the center near Briscoe, and 1st Battalion on the west near Erpig. At 0800 hours, 25 December, the battalions were to move forward and organize a main line of resistance behind the 3rd Armored Division screen. Ordered 2nd Panzer Company to withdraw to Odain to join 4th Panzer Company for a total of 23 Panthers, and 2nd Battalion of 3rd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment in the night attack. Flank guard will be 3rd Panzer Company with 1st Company of 3rd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment near the Icena River. Elements of the 3rd Battalion Der Fuhrer Regiment and 7th Panzer Company will attack Belgium. 16th Company of the SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, Pioneer, conducted terrain recon and mine sweeping up to the enemy position. There is very little artillery ammunition, so there will not be a supporting barrage. Under a clear sky and full moon, the column left the assembly area. All panzers are heavily camouflaged with tree branches. Panzerfaust fire and hits on 2 enemy tanks were seen ahead. The lead 4th Company Panzer saw tanks moving and knocked out the first one, then had its track shot off. 2 more enemy tanks were then knocked out. The 3rd Panzer in column, number 401, unknowingly took the lead upon hearing the radio command, "Forward quickly, move and fire." 401 pulled up next to a stationary, apparently friendly tank, turned off the engine to talk, and found it to be enemy. Panzer had to back up the fire and knock out the tank. 401 continued to advance, saw 2 more enemy tanks and hit both. Upon entering an S-turn, 401 spotted 9 enemy tanks, continued to advance until on their flank, saw enemy crews bail out, so moved on. The rest of the column followed up the trail of knocked out enemy tanks. The next 2 panzers drove around the S curve before seeing the enemy tanks. A flare, pistol parachute flare, revealed 9 tanks and all were quickly knocked out. The 3rd Battalion loaded onto trucks in Fanzel and moved to Brisquet. Considerable delay was encountered en route due to congested traffic and inadequate traffic control. Tank 401 drove into Manhay, but at the crossroads saw 3 enemy tanks coming into Grandmenil, so continued on north, passing lines of parked tanks and vehicles while troops stepped out of the way. The Jeep pulled out in front of 401 and was run over, causing the crew to swerve and crash into an M4 tank. The crew was thrown about badly and the engine stalled. Enemy small arms fire now hit the Panzer. After the commander recovered his headset and microphone, he calmly told the driver to restart the engine, which took several attempts. The Panzer backed onto the road and the commander threw a smoke candle behind to blind the enemy. Outside Manhay, the turret was turned to the 6 o'clock and started firing into the town. 401 pulled off the road about 300 meters and shut down. In total, 401 knocked out 7 enemy tanks, 2 tank destroyers, a half-track, and 2 jeeps. As the main column reached Manhay, the lead Panzer was knocked out by cannon fire. The next Panzer fired a flare, saw an M4 and knocked it out. Upon hearing Panther fire, 401 north of Manhay started firing again. The Ami scattered, leaving 20 functional tanks behind. 3rd Battalion Der Fuhrer Regiment occupied the town. Maps found in a Sherman showed our attack hit the boundary of 2 enemy corps while they were conducting a withdrawal. The battalion detrucked at Brisquet. Captain of the 3rd Armored Division told me the Germans had taken Manhay and were attacking Grandmenil. It is not known whether the enemy had infiltrated into the proposed 3rd Battalion assembly area west of Grandmenil. The partial moon and reflection off the snow gave fair visibility. The sound of cannons and artillery hitting Grandmenil and Manhay filled the surrounding hills. I assembled the company commanders and available staff officers, made a hasty map study, and issued a brief oral order. Weapon carries are released to company control at once. 1 machine gun platoon attached to Company I and 1 to Company K. A temporary battalion command post rear will be in Brisquet until daylight reconnaissance can be made and further information on the situation can be gained. The battalion will move east on the highway to Grandménil as rapidly as possible. March order is I Company as advance guard, then K Company, L Company, more the platoon of M Company. Upon reaching the trail intersection, the highway, 2,000 yards west of Grandménil, the battalion will turn right, follow the trail through the woods, and take up defensive positions on the high ground at the edge of the woods above the town. I Company on the left, K Company on the right, L Company in reserve. Control initially to be by radio. Panzer 431 drives towards Grandmenil, followed by the rest, passing through some anti-tank barriers. As 431 approaches Grandmenil, it hesitates at the intersection with the road to Bulge. There was an explosion behind, and the 4th tank is on fire. By the light of the fire, 431 knocks out 2 tanks on the right. 4 Panzers drive left into the meadow to deploy and have the tracks blown off by mines. Hearing engines approaching, 431s aimed at the crossroads and hold fire, not knowing whether they're German or American vehicles. At the last minute, 3 tanks are detected, but the gunner cannot see them. He fires, misses, and the tanks increase their speed, disappearing to the left. The 4th Panzer Company commander is wounded and replaced by 2nd Company commander. The situation is serious. Further advance to the objective with only 14 Panzer and no grenadier support is hopeless, but the order is given to go to Erzay. The battalion moves out, heading up the hill, up the mountain into the cold. The moon had set and the temperature had dropped to several degrees below freezing. Off in the distance can be heard artillery exploding. A humming sound in the sky was a buzz bomb. About 3 minutes passed, the humming stopped, the flame went out, and a bright flash, then the explosion. A column of American trucks, jeeps, tanks, and tank destroyers sped through the march column from the direction of Grandmenil. Colonel Richardson with the column told me he had been forced out of Grandmenil. If tanks are following, they were enemy. I abandoned the previous plan. I selected a new position on the crest of the ridge at a horseshoe bend about 1,200 yards from Grandmenil. Company I will extend approximately 200 yards either side of the road, with their left flank resting on the edge of a deep ravine. K Company on the right, L Company in reserve. 4th and 2nd Panzer Company vehicles drive off into the darkness. The road is steep enough to require low gear that limits the column's speed to just about a walking pace. The battalion halted. Company I was at the crest just before the bend in the road. The troops scattered into the woods on each side of the road to rest. Several artillery rounds burst in the treetops over Company I and K, causing several casualties, including 1 commanding officer. Radio contact was made with the artillery and the barrage stopped. Several tanks came up the muddy road from the east. As they closed on Company I, they were discovered to be German. The soldiers sought cover and one GI started shooting. The tanks stopped and sprayed the area with machine gun fire. The tanks then move on down the road firing. When the tanks disappear over the rise, a handful of troops gathered in the road and started following the tank tracks, finding 2 crushed jeeps. Enemy small arms fire hit the Panzers. All respond with machine guns and continue to move. The lead Panzer hits and runs over a small vehicle, then a second one. The column keeps moving. The elements of Company K heard enemy tanks approaching and kept on going, thinking they were more American tanks. Someone shouted, "German tanks are coming." Some thought the alarm was a joke, but nevertheless got off the road while others stayed put. In a matter of seconds, 8 tanks came into view at Trou Daloup. The lead tank stopped among K Company. The following tanks stopped further back. It was too dark to identify the tanks, but a lieutenant nearby heard the exposed commander speaking in German on the radio and yelled, "Germans! Germans in the tank!" Company K dispersed into the woods. The order was given to open fire with bazookas and rifle grenades. Many bazookas fired at the tank, but the green soldiers for Richard Viengard, who got behind the lead Panther and put a rocket into one of the rear hull toolboxes, setting the fuel on fire. The tank stopped. The other tanks drew up alongside and drenched the woods with machine gun and cannon fire, while the crew of the burning tank extinguished the blaze. The following tank tried to push the disabled Panther off the road to no avail. They could not get past it. Column commander is faced with all bad options. A conversation with the other officers in the column left 2 choices: go back to Grandmenil and take the route de Balmel, or set up a defensive line where they are in the forest. The order is given to set up defense. On the way back to his commander, the Americans spot 2 American soldiers and demand they surrender, only to be shot in the shoulder. The order was given to go back to Grandmenil and set up defensive. The Panzers pivot around and drive back to Grandmenil, firing continuously on the enemy. At Grandmenil, the 2nd Battalion of the Deutschland Regiment had moved in, and the Panzers took up positions around the town. The enemy force at Belgium tried to withdraw and had the first and last 2 vehicles destroyed by Panzer fire. the enemy abandoned six tanks, a half-track, a truck, and 2 jeeps. The lead troops of Company K were helping the wounded when they heard the tanks coming back and hid. The tanks passed by without seeing the GIs, who noticed one tank was missing. The battalion executive officer, Major Eugene O. McDonald, reported while on his way forward in his Jeep, running head-on into the leading German-operated Sherman tank. When the tank opened fire on the Jeep, the XO escaped by driving into the roadside ditch, turned around and headed to the rear through the brushy hillsides. It was estimated 9 enemy tanks had hit the battalion. Some men reported counting as many as 17. 3rd Battalion reached its position a kilometer west of and on the edge of the high ground that overlooks Grandmenil. I placed Company I on the left, K Company on the right, and L Company in reserve. The troops dig in because they feared an imminent attack. A platoon of 3rd Armored Division tanks is assigned to support the battalion. The battalion anti-tank guns take up a position a short distance back to add depth to the anti-tank protection. A small minefield is placed on the highway covered by bazookas and small arms. We have few bazooka rockets left. For some unknown reason, the SCR-300 radios will not operate from one battalion flank to the other. The battalion wire crew worked previously all day to establish wire communications to the rear. The reorganization of the 3rd Armored Division tank units in the rear of the battalion keeps breaking our wire. Due to this lack of communication, the forward command post was established directly behind the front lines. Heavy enemy artillery fire is hitting Manhay, Grandmenil, and the open area between the towns. Occasional enemy tank fire hits the same areas. 1st Panzer Abteilung set up its command post in Manhay. There's little ammunition and fuel getting forward. 6 P-38s attacked the battalion, knocking out 1 M4 tank, detonated our minefield, a battalion 2.5-ton ammunition truck, and inflicted a number of casualties, including the battalion motor officer. We had no notification of an airstrike. Shortly after this attack, orders were received to send a company to block the lower road leading northwest out of Grandmenil. Company L was given that mission. Yabos and scout aircraft are everywhere. Movement draws instant air attack. In the afternoon, the enemy launched a tank attack on Manhay from the north. Our fire knocked out many tanks, and the survivors withdrew. Late in the day, the continuous massive artillery fire started hitting Manhay. 3rd Armored Division tanks attempted to enter Manhay but were quickly forced to withdraw. Task Force McGeorge of Combat Command B attacked down the highway with a company of tanks and a company of armored infantry to retake Grandmenil, but were repulsed by extremely heavy anti-tank and automatic weapons fire. Company L on the lower road was reinforced with a platoon of 57mm anti-tank guns from the Regiment Anti-Tank Company, the Regiment Mines Platoon, and a platoon of the 703rd Tank Destroyer Battalion. I was alerted to have one company on the upper road prepared to assist Task Force McGeorge in capturing Grandmenil. Company K is selected for the mission. All available fragmentation and light phosphorus hand grenades are turned over to K Company. The battalion SCR-284 is issued to Company K. A spare SCR-284 is borrowed from Regiment to communicate with Company K. The attack jumped off. The supporting tanks on the left, 1st Platoon in the center, 2nd Platoon on the right. 1st Platoon had fought its way through the village. When K Company comes under heavy fire, they set up defense. A German tank begins shooting at K Company. Sounds of other tanks are audible, and machine guns opened up on K Company. The Germans counterattack with 2 tanks. Company K pulls back to the edge of the village. Shortly after daybreak, K Company has to withdraw, covered by heavy artillery fire. Company K suffers severe losses and has to reorganize. So I order I Company to occupy the Company K positions. I will take Erzay with a 2-prong attack. One column will follow me, will follow the Rue d'Erzay, and the other the narrow, winding Route de Beaumont through the heavy wooded terrain to outflank the enemy defenses. As the column on Rue d'Erzay reached the west edge of Grandmenil, they encountered a deployed U.S. armor attack on Grandmenil. The Panthers knock out all but 2 of the M4s, but our attack is stalled. En route Belmont, the 16 Panzers stopped in the narrow gorge blocked by felled trees. Halting to clear the obstacle, 2 Panzers were knocked out. An enemy SP gun was then destroyed. The column came under heavy artillery fire and withdrawals. I received word report to Brigadier General Thurmont E. Bogneau, commanding officer of Combat Command B, to receive an attack order. I took the S3 along and proceeded to the designated point. The battalion, reinforced with tanks from Combat Command B, will attack at 14:15 hours, and with 2 companies abreast, seize the town of Grandmenil and set up defensive. A 5-minute artillery barrage will fire on the town beginning at H-5. I protest having only 20 minutes to prepare an attack against a strongly defended position. I was half a mile from my troops. 1 company was deployed in the woods in or out to join the battalion, and my remaining companies were deployed in the defensive position. There's no compromising. H-hour remained unchanged. The battalion will attack at 14:15 hours. Fortunately, on the return trip, I met the commander of Company L, telling him to accompany Combat Command B tanks into the town. During the attack and defense, L is responsible for the left half of the town. Company I will attack down a small trail from the west and is responsible for the right half of the town. Company K in reserve will follow Company I on order. Many of the U.S. 17 artillery battalions between the Asni and Leon Rivers began firing in preparation as I completed issuing orders. Somehow the companies managed to start the attack on schedule. The artillery preparation permitted the attacking companies to reach the outskirts of the town before receiving heavy opposition. The bitter house-to-house struggle continued all afternoon. Enemy burp guns and machine guns were located to fire along the streets and created murderous crossfire at each intersection. Each building had to be systematically searched before it could be occupied. The battalion observation post spotted a platoon of enemy tanks moving from Manhay toward Grandmenil. Artillery fire set the lead tank on fire, causing the others to withdraw. Shortly after dark, some of the defenders attempted to withdraw across the open ground in Manhay. The observation post called for artillery, catching the Germans in the open and inflicting heavy casualties. As the command group moved into Grandmenil, the wire crew laid wire behind us. The battalion anti-tank platoon moved in and occupied positions facing south and east. This concludes the presentation.